You got your deck, you got your budget, now all you need is a list in order to put together to make Darkworld as competitive as possible. What's up YouTube, Darryl here from Zephyr Wargames, and today I am bringing you a $100 or less budget list that can compete for Darkworld following the release of their structure deck. So before we dive headfirst into this, massive shout out to Jordan who has helped me put this deck together. It will involve the main deck, the extra deck and the side deck, all within that tidy budget. So with all of that out of the way, smash that like button, hit that notification bell and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. I'll also show you two combos at the end of the video that will utilise two different engines for the deck depending on how you want to play it. So we'll start off with the cards that are being reprinted in the structure deck, and of course you want to be rocking triple of the Graphite Lord, and this is really important because he is a named material for, of course, the Graphite Fusion. We are playing triple Snow. Now, Snow is kind of a bit of a weird one, and what I mean by that is, if it's discarded to the graveyard via card effect, you get to add a Darkworld card, which is really nice because it actually gives you access to a lot more now. In the past, ideally, it was getting you another Darkworld monster or Gates of the Darkworld, whereas now it can actually access Darkworld Ascension, which is an awesome fusion spell, and Darkworld Library, which can help maintain some resources as well. Alongside that, we play triple Brow, Huntsman of the Darkworld. This is your drawer, so if it's discarded by card effect, you get to draw one card. Now, keep in mind as well, in the past, Darkworlds had to be discarded via their own effects or via the help of dangers. And what I mean by that is, the Graphite Fusion actually turns any of your opponent's card effects to become, or the first one they activate, to become your opponent discards a card. So that means you can discard any of your Darkworld monsters and trigger their secondary effects. So Brow's... So with all the other ones as well, Snow gives you an additional effect to target a monster in your opponent's graveyard. You get to add a Darkworld, and then you also get to special summon the monster you targeted. So you're going to be able to gain additional effects. Now this is really important for the next card, and which is Silver Warlock of the Darkworld. Now the reason the second effect is this is so important is if it's discarded in general, you get to special summon it from the graveyard. If it's discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, your opponent returns exactly 2 cards from their hand to the bottom of their deck. So it basically rips your opponent's hand for 2. You can play the other level 5 monsters as well, all reprinted in the structure deck, and they will grant you a different effect. So some of them is pop 2 cards on the field, some of them is pop all back row. It does depend on what you are facing, but I think it's a really kind of cool interaction and route of play being able to hand rip your opponent. Like I said, some of the ones that let you destroy 2 cards on the field can be more important if you are considering something like the Flunderees matchup, but this can be quite useful to burn out your opponent's resource. So that's it for the Darkworld reprints that we are using in the deck. For the Danger reprints, we are going with 2 Thunderbird, 2 Bigfoot, and the 1 Sukanoko. Obviously, Sukanoko is only at 1. And with the Bigfoot and the Thunderbird, these give you great ways of outing floodgates, outing problematic monsters like the Wind Barrier statue, and instigate rank 8 plays with your Graphite as well. So for those of you that don't know how the the dangers work, is under certain floodgates like Vanity's Fiend, even Gozen's Rivalries, everything like that, they can still be revealed in hand. And the reason for that is that the outcome is not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed that you are going to summon that monster. What I mean by this is, for example, let's say our opponent has Rivalry up on the board and we can only control Fiends. You reveal Thunderbird, and keep in mind, all Dangers reveals effect are not once per turn, it's only their discard effects. So you reveal Thunderbird, and your opponent doesn't discard it, and you go, right, okay, cool. You get to reveal Thunderbird again, and the idea is, apart from burning away your hand resource, you keep revealing the Thunderbird until it triggers and gets discarded to then pop the Rivalry. Because the outcome isn't guaranteed that you're going to summon down the Thunderbird, you can keep revealing it until it ultimately gets discarded, and then you can out the back row. So it's a really kind of cool interaction, and off the back of that, of course, all the Dangers will trigger the first effects of the Darkworlds and put the Grepher in the graveyard set for the fusion spell, and or on top of that can also set themselves up for the Grepher's revival effect. So that's it for the reprinted monsters in the structure deck. Now onto the reprinted spells before we go over the brand new cards. So the reprinted spells that you're going to be rocking is 2 Gate of the Darkworld. Now again, a lot of people are playing free of this. I feel that you don't need to anymore because you've got a brand new card in Genta. So Genta actually searches you out specifically the gates of the Dark World, and obviously you have Snow. So the idea is you want to use Snow for everything apart from this, and then Genta is a card that will benefit massively from the gates of the Dark World. So I'll show you Genta alongside it. So this is one of the new cards, and what makes this so good is you get to discard this card to the graveyard to add Gates of the Dark World from the deck to the hand. If this card is banished and you control a Dark World card, you get to special summon it from the graveyard. So the best thing about that, from the Banish Zone, is the Gate of the Dark World. All Fiend monsters gain 300 attack and defense, and then once per turn you get to banish one Fiend type monster from your graveyard to discard a Fiend type monster and then draw a card. So if you open up the Gate plus Genta plus any other Fiend monster, you discard Genta, activate this, or get this, activate this, discard the Fiend monster by banishing, get the Genta. This will special the Genta, let you draw a card as well, and then the card you've discarded will trigger its own effect. So it's absolutely mental. It gives you a free level 4 on the board, which is really important in a tier element matchup, because you can just go Abyss Dweller, pass, and they cry a little bit inside. The other brand new card we play is the other Greffa, or the Yugioh. So Yugioh is actually an insane boss monster. So you get to special this card from your graveyard specifically by returning one level 7 or lower Dark World monster. So pretty much all of your monsters apart from Greffa, which is mental. To the hand, so you get to then trigger their discard's effect if you've got another Danger, which is why Danger Dark Worlds are so insane. If this card is discarded by your opponent's card effect, you get to, if this card is discarded to the graveyard by your own effect, you get to add one level 5 or higher Dark World monster from your deck to the hand, except himself. Then if it was discarded by your opponent's card effect, you get to special summon one level 4 or lower Dark World monster from your deck or graveyard to either field. Now obviously this is really important for the level 1, because the level 1 used to be able to put on your opponent's field, and then it triggered to make you discard a card to trigger another effect. But ultimately I don't feel you need that in this kind of modernized version, because I feel these new cards are just absolutely insane. Probably the best new card apart from the fusion monster in itself is the brand new fusion spell, which is Darkworld Ascension. It is a Darkworld card, the artwork is insane. So during the main phase, fusion summon one Fiend monster from your extra deck by banishing fusion materials listed on it from your field and or graveyard. If summoning a Darkworld fusion monster this way, you can also discard monsters from your hand as materials. During your main phase, if this card is in the graveyard, you can add it to your hand and then discard one Darkworld monster. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn, and it is a quick effect, so it could be used during your opponent's turn as well. So the idea is you activate this during your turn, you then get to go again and activate it again. On top of that, if you were to play tier element cards, you can actually activate this, ditching the tier element, and you'll get a double fusion because you can get the Greffa. And if you wanted to, you could ultimately get 2 of the Greffa Dragon Overlords, depending on where you want to go. The last of the brand new cards we play is the one Darkworld Library. I'm undecided if I want to play this more or not, but during the main phase you get to discard one Darkworld monster, and if you do, all Darkworld monsters you currently control gain attack equal to the discarded monster's level times 100 until the end of this turn. If your monster or monsters whose original type is Fiend is discarded by the effect of a Darkworld card or an opponent's card, even during a damage step, you get to discard one card, then draw 2 cards. You can only use each of the effects once per turn. Now, the one massive loophole you need to keep in mind of with your Dark Worlds, which is why you won't see Dark Worlds playing stuff like Twin Twisters, is Dark Worlds need to be discarded via card effect, not as cost, which is why a lot of these new cards are actually discarding as part of the effects. Now, it should be a bit more common now that you have had a format with tier elements where they actually discard as effect rather than as cost, so you can kind of see more of how the Dark Worlds will synergize with the tier elements. So again, all of those cards you've just seen come in the structure deck. That is a giant chunk of the deck. I've shown you the new cards and the old cards. Now it's time to show you the cards that you will need to buy in order to make this competitive. I'll put all the prices up on the list at the start so you can see each price of each individual section and towards the end of each individual card as well. So the first bit I'm going to show you is an alternative engine. So the first engine we are playing is Triple Tour Guide alongside one Neko Main King and one Sangan. Now, believe it or not, this engine probably costs just as much as the second engine that I will show you, and I've put them in a different sleeve so you don't confuse what is actually in the main deck and what is actually in an additional deck. So before I show you the rest of the monsters, what would go with this engine and what I would trade in and out directly is 2 more Allure of Darknesses. So you've got more draw cards in here with Allure of Darkness. The Neko Main King is about £5, and then the Tour Guides are about £4 each. Now, the good thing about this combo and the way it works so nicely is you normal summon Tour Guide because, as you saw, most of these cards are all special summoned via effects rather than actually wanting to normal summon them. And the only time you'd ever normal summon them is if you want to get a Greffa to the board, which is something you still want to avoid doing. The other is that Tour Guide would special out Sangan. You would then link these off into whatever link monster you want. So the ideal one is something like Muckracker because it's got 2 fiends as well and it just needs 2 effect monsters. Off of that, Sangan will trigger to search you out the Neko Main King. The reason the Neko Main King is so important is, as I've mentioned already, the Greffa Dragon Overlord turns a normal spell, normal trap or monster effect that your opponent activates into your opponent discards 1 card. Meaning, for example, if they were to activate Raigeki and you chained the Greffa Dark Overlord effect, Raigeki would no longer say destroy all monsters on the field, it would actually say your opponent discards 1 card. Meaning, your opponent, as in us, the Darkworld player, will discard 1 card. So, what you do is you discard the Neko Main King, and then during your opponent's turn, when this card in your possession is sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, it becomes the end phase of the turn. It is in your hand, so it is in your possession. It is technically being discarded via your opponent's card effect because Greffa isn't the effect that is discarding it, it is your opponent's card, and Greffa's effect is changing that card's effect. A little bit of a rabbit hole, but as long as you stick with it, you'll know. So Neko Main King then turns it to the end phase, and the chances are you've already got one of these on the board, so you're able to be pushing for an OTK the next turn, because you also have a link to where your Tour Guide and Sangan would have been as well. So it's an insane little interaction. Jordan came up with this, so full-on credits to him on that one, and I highly, highly advise that. Now, if you're like, you know what, this is cool, but it's very gimmicky, I want to do something a bit more consistent and a bit more powerful, well, then this is when you start looking into the tier elements. Now, disclaimer, this bottom line that I'm about to show you is not in the actual deck profile. This is just an alternative engine that costs the same amount as the top engine, because the laws are like £2 each as well. So, you play triple Chiron, double Merly, and then in place of the Allure of Darknesses, you play 2 Beginning of the Ends, because you're going to be milling more cards. Now, why is this engine so important and so cool? Well, in the extra deck, you also add a Kit Kalos and a Ru Kalos. Now, Ru Kalos is about £10, Kit Kalos is about £5. You can probably pick up a playset of Chirons for about £5, and hopefully you have a really good friend that will throw you the Merlies in for free. Now, the idea behind this is your Chiron would then trigger its effect to mill free. If you hit a second Chiron or you hit a Merly, you go straight into your Kit Kalos. Kit Kalos can then send the one that didn't get sent to the graveyard and fuse your Kit Kalos with whatever one you did into a Ru Kalos, giving you a free Omni-Negate in forms of dealing with monster effects for Nibiru's or anything else like that. Not to mention as well, with Chiron, if you were to, keep in mind you need 2 Aquas for this, you will need to either hit a Nessie in the graveyard or have one of these ones on there. On the flip side of that, if these are discarded by dangers, you'll also be able to trigger the effects. But if they're discarded by dangers and you already have a Greffa in the graveyard, both of these can trigger to go into the dragon because all of you need to make this is Greffa plus any dark monster, which they both are. So again, it kind of opens up not only consistency to get into the Greffa Dragon Lord, but also to unlock an alternative fusion protection. So being able to end your board on a Ru Kalos plus a Greffa Dragon Overlord and then something else in your hand that will get an additional effect. So let's say a silver. You're going to spin 2 back from your opponent. They would have already burnt 2 effects that are going to be negated by these 2 anyway. So they're playing with 2 cards, not to mention whatever else you might have played around or used. So that is an alternative engine. But continuing on with the profile, the remainder of the cards that I highly advise you to get is 2 Salamander Catalyzers. So this card came out in Darkwing Blast. It's a common, you should be able to pick them up. It did seem like it's slightly short printed, but I didn't buy a huge amount of it. So you can reveal this card and 1 Fiend monster in your hand, special summon one of them, and discard the other. There is no cost to that effect, it's all in one, so it will also trigger your Darkworlds. When a monster is destroyed by battle involving your Fiend monster, while this card is in the graveyard, you can add this card to your hand. You can only use each effect once per turn. It is free loop fodder, and it gets any Fiend out of your hand. It is also a level 4, so it helps instigate rank 4 plays. Yes, it is a fire, so it doesn't synergize with Allure of Darkness, but that's not the end of the world. What does make this card so good is that in theory, you could reveal this plus 1 Fiend monster. Summon this card, discard the Fiend monster. The Fiend monster being a Darkworld would trigger its effect. If it's a Brow, draw a card. If it's a Snow, search you a card. It just goes round and round and round. It's really cool, and I liked it as a little tech option. So massive shout out to Rob, who actually discovered this. The other dangers that weren't reprinted, and these are actually about £5 each, is double Nessie and one Jackalope. Now, obviously, the Nessie is more important in the Tier Element version because it is an Aqua, but alongside that, your Nessie and your Jackalope are your best cards because Jackalope will summon from the deck. Doesn't necessarily need to be needed. It can be cut if you want to, because Nessie will search you out everything you need. But Jackalope can become a pseudo level 8 if you are wanting to go for your rank 8 plays and push for game there. The other final cards that you play is 2 trading. Now, the reason we play double trading is you have plenty of targets. So not only is the new Rhine Bure a level 8, which is great, but you also have all of your dangers, so Bigfoot and Thunderbird. So if your opponent, for example, has Wind Barrier Statue out and you've got Trading and Bigfoot, you activate Trading, you discard Bigfoot, you pop it. It's great. You draw 2 cards as well. And then you also have Grapha, so OG Trading target, put this to the graveyard, put a Darkworld on the board, bounce it back, summon this guy. Like, it's everything you could possibly need. So Trading is probably like the first draw spell you would go for, and then depending on which engine you choose, either the top one or the Tier Elements one, you can then adapt it as you see fit. So that's it for the whole entire main deck. As you saw, it was a very small engine of new cards. So entitled 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 cards that weren't in the main decks, reprinted or new. And that depends if you want the Tier Element version or you want the Neko Main King, which I think is a sick version. Just being able to turn skip your opponent is really funny. Cool. Moving on to the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we are rocking 2 Grapha Dragon Overlord of the Darkworld. This card is Mac Daddy. This is what makes this deck so much worth buying. It does require specifically Grapha and 1 Dark monster. It would have been nice if it was like a Dark World monster and a Dark monster, but it's what it is. When your opponent activates a normal spell, trap card, or monster effect, quick effect, you can make that effect become your opponent discards 1 card. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn. If this fusion summon card leaves the field by an opponent's card, you can special summon 1 of your Grapha Dragon Lords of the Darkworld that is banished or in the graveyard, and then each player discards 1 card. Now, obviously, the downside is if you make each player discard 1 card in a Tier Element matchup, they might be able to trigger and continue to play. Whereas if you want to be doing it, if you don't want to bring them back, then obviously you don't trigger that effect because it's a then each player, so it's mandatory to do so. Moving on to the XYZs, we do play the 1 Abyss Dweller. Obviously, this is a little bit more important or more consistent if you play Shiren, but in this version, you still have a couple of different 4s that can get you there. For the rank 8s, we've got the number 22 Zombie Stein, and then of course we do play the number 97 Dragulabon, which can give you an aggressive engine of number 100 for an OTK push, and Hope Harbinger for 38. Now the fact that these have just had reprints, I believe Ghost from the Past 2 and Battles of Legend Crystal Revenge, these are all like a £1 card, and both of these got reprinted in OTS, so you should have a good friend that will give you these for free. For the Link monsters, we've got one Cross Sheep because you've got Fusion access and you've got XYZ access. We are playing 2 Muckraker from the Underworld. You don't have to play 2 of this, but this is like a £3.50 card. And why this card is so good is it's 2 effect monsters, so that's where your Tour Guide combo comes into play. And then it cannot be used as Link material the turn it is Link summoned. However, if a monster or monsters you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you get to tribute 1 themed monster instead, including itself. You can target 1 themed monster in your graveyard except itself, discard 1 card as effect, so the target is the cost. You discard 1 card, and if you do, special summon that monster. You can't special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except Fiends. Well, I don't really care, because that's what I'm going to do, is summon out Fiends. Now, there are some higher Fiends that we can climb up to, which I'll show you when you lock yourself under this. Another Link too that I quite like the idea of is Pit Knight Erlin. The reason this is so cool is that you can make it under Cross Sheep, and it will point to Cross Sheep. So if you then summon a fusion to the zone that Cross Sheep points to, during your turn, or your opponent's turn, remember the spell is quick play, you can trigger Pit Knight as well. So not only will you negate a card, you'll summon a boss monster, you'll get to draw cards, revive a card from the graveyard as well. It's kind of a little niche card, and if you do have Muckraker in the main zone, you've also got the Link there as well. And then you also have the ability to co-link off of the back of a Nightmare Cerberus as well. So you've got other options to kind of make Pit Knight as consistent as possible. But I thought it was kind of like a really cool common tech card that you can put in this deck for really cheap and still do incredibly well with it. Of course, the other thing monster we play is Phoenix and Unicorn. And then the final boss monster we play is Zeroboros. And the reason we play Zeroboros is it's actually really easy to get into a Link 4. If you want to, and you've got more money to upgrade, you can go into something like Appaloosa, Avramax, Access Code if you really, really want to, but then you're turning your budget up by about $35 to $40. The reason Zero Boros is so cool is because you have so many different ways to get monsters to the board. It's very easy for Zero Boros to just go, cool, I've put 4 monsters on the board, I've regained a lot of resource, I'm going to special summon down 1 more monster, trigger Zero Boros, clear the entire board off, and then continue to make my plays with bigger monsters. Especially when the quick play spell lets you use the graveyard as well. It's absolutely insane and just keeps you going and going and going. Plus, not a lot of people actually expect Zero Boros, so when that drops on a Flunder deck or a... obviously the idea is you would have cleared the Penguin off on the Penguin anyway. But once you drop it on a Flunder player or Kashtira player, Sprite player, heck, even a Tier Element player, they pretty much lose all their resource. So moving on to the extra deck, we'll start off with the only monster that we play in the extra deck, and that is Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood. This is for the pure fact that you just need a win con in time. Like if games go on too long, especially with Tier Elements taking like a 20-minute for game 1, a card like this will ultimately lead you to game if you drop it at the right time. And a playset was like £2.50, so I was like, you'd be absolutely mad not to have a time win con in your side deck. For the spell cards, I've gone with triple Forbidden Chalice. And the reason I've gone with Chalice, you could play Darkworld no more if you want to. I just feel that Chalice is going to be more effective in this format. Purely because, yes, Dark Ruler could be really good because you can turn off the board and then you can continue to bring your beat sticks on the board, clear your board off, and then move in. However, Chalice gives you the ability to not only activate it, set it and activate it during your opponent's turn, it allows you to play under, or gives you the ability, unlike Droplet, to play under a Dimension Fissure. It also gives you that ability to kind of catch your opponent off guard. You can also negate your own stuff during the damage step, which is really cool, and boost them up. So if they're like, you know what, I'm going to Dark Ruler you, and you go, right, okay, cool, fine. And then they do everything they need to get a monster that is stronger than, I don't know, one of your Greffers, or heck, even your extra deck Darkworld Greffer. And they go, right, cool, attack. You go, yep, fine, damage calc, and flip Chalice, negating your own monster's effect, and then boosting its attack. And it's just like, cool, punch it back in the face. We've then got, of course, triple Galaxy Cyclone. Now, the reason I've put this in here over Cosmic Cyclone, Twin Twisters, anything like that, is to keep in mind that we are moving into a new ban list, so there will be D-Fissures running around. Yes, this will only hit set cards, so it is a card that you need to wait until the next turn to get rid of it, but it's just one of them ones that, because you're going to want to reveal your hand as much as possible with dangers and discard cards and trigger cards, this is one of the cards that even if you've activated it, it's still going to affect in the graveyard. If you do discard it and you still maintain your hand advantage off of a reveal of a danger, it's not the end of the world, because ideally you're going to side this in, probably going first, because then the idea would be that you reveal this, or you ditch this in the graveyard with one of your other cards, and if your opponent goes, right, okay, well, I'm going to activate D-Fissure, you go, all right, well, I've already done everything I need to. Go into your turn 2, banish this, get rid of the D-Fissure, and then go again, revealing all your cards in hand and building your board up. Obviously, Cosmic Cyclone might be a little bit more effective, especially when you need to deal with stuff like Dreaming Town, you need to deal with stuff like other like set back rows. Cosmic could be a lot better, but when you actually look at the meta, you got Sulliak as well. It's entirely up to you. I just thought this was kind of a cool card that when you're discarding, you get most advantage of it. If you wanted to, you could put 2 Galaxy and then 2 Cosmic, taking out one of the Dogwoods or one of the Chalices. Or even one of the next card I'm going to show you that comes in the structure deck, one of the Deck Devies. Now the Deck Devies is obviously a side deck card that you put in going first. You treat a Dark Monster with 2,000 or more attack, very easy to do in this deck. You look at your opponent's hand, all monsters they control, and all cards they draw until the end of this turn, end of the third turn. And if you do, you destroy all monsters with 15 or less attack. Now, the reason this isn't in the main deck is you 100% do not want to be activating this against Tier Elements. Yes, it will only hit some of the cards, but the cards you do hit will absolutely nuke you because they'll be able to continue making their plays, and they'll go on and on and on. But you flip this against Flunder, GG, bro. They are not playing. Another card you can flip against Flunder and GG if you want to do Battles of the Boss Monsters, this deck will win, is Triple Skill Drain, which also comes in the structure deck, so you're pretty much covered on all angles. Now, obviously, Skill Drain is not going to be the most effective in the Tier Element matchup, which is why you can kind of see that you've got the balance to deal with. Tier Element matchup, when it goes a little bit skyward. The Flunderees matchup, the Sprite matchup, the Flunderees matchup. Heck, you can probably even hit the Sprite matchup with this as well. And then just generic matchups and everything else you might need to deal with, especially with D-Fissure coming back to free. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the combos. Now with Dark Worlds, obviously they do require a bit of setup, so the way we're going to do this is we've opened up Tour Guide and a route to the Dark World Ascension, and we do have Greffer in the graveyard. It's very important to kind of get these as they are. Should normal summon your Tour Guide, use Tour Guide's effect to special summon out Sangan from the deck. You then need to link these off, because if you overlay them, Sangan won't go from field to graveyard, so you won't be able to get the effect of that. Now, the ideal one to go into will be something like Muckracker, but if you want to revive Sangan from the graveyard and go again the next turn, you could go into something like Cross Sheep. It really doesn't matter. If you've got more access to a bit more budget, you can go into IP Masquerena as well. You'll activate Ascension after obviously triggering Sangan's effect to add you the Neko Main King. You'll banish the Greffa and your Tour Guide, which meets the requirements for the brand new Greffa Dragon Overlord of the Darkworld. This, of course, then trigger an effect. So again, if you wanted to link climb, you can bring Cross Sheep, bring back Sangan, and go again. But the idea is, ultimately, during your opponent's turn, when they activate a normal spell, trap card, or monster effect, you activate the Greffa Lord, change that effect to your opponent discards a card. Neko Main King goes from your hand to the graveyard. Neko Main King's effect will trigger in the graveyard. If they can't stop it, it will then be able to go, right, okay, cool, enter, goes to the end phase. They've got nothing to activate, passes back to you. And just through this combo here, you're already in a very good kind of position. And you've only used, obviously after a setup, technically 2.5 cards. So you're good to rock and roll with that one. I'm now going to show you the tier element one. So now I'll show you the tier element combo. So this is if you put the tier element engine in instead of the Tour Guide engine. Now the idea is, if you go, she'll go with Shiren, you'll use Shiren's effect. We're just going to say that she discards another copy of herself from the hand, and you'll mill 3. Now, if you mill a Greffa, you do have routes to go into the Greffa fusion if you want to, but the idea is you're going to use the Shiren's effect to spin these both back to the deck and summon out Kit Kalos. Kit Kalos' effect will then trigger, and then you can add the Merly if you want to use the effect of Kit Kalos to mill 8, and that's only if you're trying to push for the Greffa play. But in this one, we're going to use Kit Kalos' effect to send the Merly, trigger the Merly effect to put itself and Kit Kalos back to the deck to summon out your Rue Kalos. This now protects all of your danger plays going forward and everything else you might want to do. Now, keeping in mind as well, that was only going to be 2 cards in our hand, so we'd still have 3 more cards to play with, whether that be a danger card, whether that be a draw card. Again, if you were playing beginning of the end, that's probably where you'd go for the mill 8 combo instead, just so you can kind of make this a little bit more effective. The only issue is you still need a way of getting Merly to the graveyard via card effect in order to trigger. But if off the beginning and the end you've managed to hit all the darks and you get into the spell card, or you mill the Ascension card, you can add that back to the graveyard, and then you can fuse the Merly with the Greffa and everything else you need as well. So it kind of just shows you different routes to play. And obviously the tier element combo is a very basic tier element combo, but just for those of you that don't know, that wanted to play Darkworlds and were like, alright, well, how can I upgrade it? That's just an option for you to see. Anyway, I hope this has been informative for you. I hope this has given you a full breakdown. I tried to go in as much detail as I possibly could to kind of go through it and show you everything the deck can do and produce. It's definitely a fun deck to play around with. It's going to be a little bit more tricky thanks to the current ban list. Waff, Defissure at 3. However, the deck itself is still incredibly powerful and a lot of fun to play. So I can't wait to rock this out at locals. Hopefully the the structure decks will turn up in time for me in order to kind of play that and go from there. Anyway, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. If you do have any questions, by all means, please put them in the comments down below. I'll be more than happy to answer them for you. But with all of that out of the way, as absolutely always, guys, stay safe and, of course, happy dueling.